I think I've got everybody here. All right, so let's begin. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Valorizer monthly event, Shop Talk. Shop Talk provides exclusive, unique content for monthly and annual subscribers of the Valorizer. My name's Ed Arnold, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we get started, I just want to say a quick hello to the subscribers who are joining us live today. There are a couple folks who've just come in, so thank you for that. Today's session is being recorded, and all paid subscribers will get access to it in the next day or so, as well as access to a post-session chat room. So with that, what I'd like to do is begin, and I'll begin by introducing my very first guest on Shop Talk, Stephen Forth. Stephen and I have known each other for 20 years. Stephen has founded 3 companies in the pricing space. First, there was Leverage Point, then Ibica, and now his current company, which is ValueIQ.ai. He is a prolific blogger and is currently finishing his first book titled Pricing for the Agent Economy. So welcome, Stephen. Thank you for joining me today for the very first episode of Shop Talk.
Thank you, Ed. I'm honored, and it's also nice to see people I know from the community here as well. So great to have people here.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I really appreciate it. And again, thanks for folks who are joining live. So Stephen and I are going to have like just a one-to-one discussion here. We'll open up the chat if people have specific questions or comments. We're going to keep this short, about only like 35 minutes. And I'd like to just begin that conversation, Stephen, with a personal question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So what I think what makes you unique to me as a pricing expert out of all the other pricing experts I know is that you are a true Renaissance man, because you write about a lot of different things aside from pricing. You talk about design thinking, technology, art, and a lot of other areas. So what I'm really interested to hear from you is, how do all these different interests shape your perspective and approach about pricing, and like how do they connect, or do they connect in your mind?
So I think the two sort of, or the 2 or 3 deeper ones that really shape how I think about pricing. The first is the design approach. So I very much think that both value modeling and especially pricing are design activities, and that the ways that we think about design generally apply to the design of a pricing model as well. So the different approaches to design thinking that have been developed over the years by different people, they each provide a valuable lens into how you craft a pricing model, and how you infuse it with a value model. And that's really sort of central to my approach, and part of what I try to bring to any conversation. And I'll give you an example. I've recently been engaged by a major pricing consulting firm to act as a coach, and to coach them on some of their pricing advisory work. Now, one of the best practices in design is to have design reviews or design critiques. My youngest son went to the Southern California Institute of Architecture, known as SCI-Arc, which is one of the top architecture schools. And I had the great good fortune to sit in on design critiques. Prominent architects from all over the world would come and sit in and critique the graduate students' designs. We don't do this anywhere near enough in pricing. You know, when was the last time you saw a pricing consulting firm invite outside experts in to critique the designs that they'd done?
I've never seen it.
Yeah, it doesn't happen, right?
Right.
It should happen though.
Yeah.
So that's one perspective on this. Another area that I think is really productive. I'm sorry, I could rattle on about this forever, so I'll try to keep this short. Is parametric design. So
and what is that for folks who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah. So over the last 2 decades, this has been a hot topic in not just architectural, but also in systems design. And basically, the idea is that your design is you create a set of parameters. To take a really simple example, okay, so I have a cup here, and there are very few parameters that define the cup. There's its height, its circumference, the thickness of the wall of the cup, the positioning of the handle, the fluting of the surface. Anyway, there's a very small number of parameters that define the design of a cup, and I can generate a space of all possible cup designs by manipulating those parameters. Now, some of those parameters or combinations of parameters will generate a good cup design, others won't. But you can apply the same idea to pricing and value models. If you think about a value model, basically, we generally say it's a system of equations, but it's really a system of parameters. And by varying those parameters, you can explore the different ways that the value model can be shaped and implemented. The same thing for a pricing model. It's a system of parameters, and by changing those parameters, you can explore different designs and see which design really fits the space. And then as the market environment and competitive environment and customer environment change, you can keep the model relevant and current by changing the parameters. So anyway, those are a couple of examples of how ideas from design, I think, intersect with value and pricing design.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I think that ties into the technology piece of it as well, because as you were describing those design parameters, I was thinking, well, that's an AI algorithm of some sort, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the future of pricing design will be to use AI both to find and figure out the parameters of the model, and then to keep that model current by connecting it to what's happening in the environment. I very much think that's the future of pricing design.
Yeah.
And then if I connect this to the book that I'm working on with Michael Mansart at Zuora and Wolfgang Ulaga at INSEAD in Paris, we're defining, it says the book is called Pricing for the Agent Economy, but it's very much a book about credit-based pricing.
Yeah, I know. There's a topic I want to dive in a little bit. But before we do, I just want to sort of, as a follow-up question, what is it about pricing that you find so interesting?
So you'll remember when I first got involved in pricing. So I started my first technology company when I was in my 20s in Tokyo. I started other ones that were of differing degrees of success in the 90s and early 2000s. They were mostly in the learning software or in the knowledge management space or media companies. And if you had told me in 2006 that I would get obsessed without pricing, I would have said, I think you've been smoking too much of the local product. But then, I was brought to Monitor Group, and at Monitor Group, which is where Ed and I met, we were asked to look at lots of different ways and different things that Monitor was doing, behavioral-based market segmentation, some psychometric analysis, scenario planning, because Monitor had acquired the Global Business Network. And it was actually you, Ed, that really got me interested in pricing and introduced me to Tom Nagel and the rest of the team there. And I think it was two things. Pricing is where all the different parts of a business come together. It has a dimension of product design. It has a dimension of competitive analysis. It has a dimension of customer understanding. It's really the place in the business where all the different pieces come together. And at the end of the day, if you can't agree on price, you don't have a customer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really an incredibly good place for someone who wants to bring things together, bring the different parts of a business together to act. Sorry, just one other thing is, as many of the people on this call know, I'm obsessed with innovation and models of innovation and how innovation changes businesses and society. Hey, I've worked in early stage innovation my entire life. But if you can't communicate the value of an innovation and figure out how to price it, it's not going to be sustainable. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's interested in creativity and innovation should logically be obsessed about pricing.
Right. I mean, that is capturing the value of the innovation that you're spending a lot of your time and effort developing. Otherwise, there's not going to be much more innovation.
Exactly. If you can't capture the value through price, you can't get a sustaining feedback loop going, and the innovation will wither away.
So let's talk about innovation in AI, and that's all I see when I'm looking at blogs, especially anywhere, but in pricing, I'd say most articles that you read about pricing is connected to AI in some way. But it's kind of amazing that this only really started for real about a couple years ago. But you've been there from day one, Stephen. You've been writing about this before other people were even thinking about it. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, if you were to give like a quick summary of where AI has gone in terms of pricing in the last couple of years, and where do you think it's going? That would be very helpful, I think, and interesting.
Yeah. So I think we should begin though by remembering that the old heavy metal pricing software,
mm-hmm.
The Pros and Zilliant and Vendavo and more recently PriceFX, those companies have been using something, at least AI or AI adjacent for many, many years. Mm-hmm. So AI is not new to pricing.
You mean in terms of the machine learning aspect of it?
Yeah. So we should remember that when we talk about this.
Yeah.
What changed, of course, is transformer models and the incredible power of transformer models to bring in huge amounts of disparate information. Mm-hmm. So if you think of how something like Anthropic's models or OpenAI's models or Google's models of how they're trained on enormous amounts of very, very disparate information.
Right.
Whereas the old pricing AIs were trained on comparatively small amounts of very similar information. The new generation of transformer-based models are trained on enormous amounts of very, very, crazily different.
Is that the distinction between structured and unstructured data, or is it more than that?
I think it's more than that, because it's not just that the data is structured versus unstructured. It's also that it comes from all sorts of different sources, mm-hmm. and it can make unexpected connections.
Right.
So, I'm sure all of us who work with AIs are constantly finding that if you prompt them in interesting ways, they will find connections that never occurred to you.
So that's the technology end of it. But from a company that is, trying to catch up with pricing with their AI-enabled products, right? What's going on right now, and how has that changed in the last year or so?
So, I'm shameless self-promotion. I think that the biggest change has actually been around value modeling and mm-hmm. the ability to use AI in value modeling. There's a guy called Sangeet Paul Chowdhury who has an incredibly good book called Reshuffle. Maybe Ed, you can drop a link to the Reshuffle book website in when you're.
Yeah, I'll send that afterward. Yeah.
But his basic proposition in this book is that what happens when a new technology, such as generative AI, is adopted, the first thing it does is it melts away constraints. So the first thing you have to act is, what constraints disappear when this new technology is introduced? When you melt away constraints, though, a new generation of constraints emerges, or they probably were always there, but they become visible. And that the people that are going to win in those markets are the people that figure out how to manage those constraints. So let's just apply this to value modeling and pricing for a moment. Value models used to be expensive.
Right.
Even if someone was smart enough to know who Ed Arnold was and could find him and reach him and get him agree to do the work, he's going to, I don't know how much you charged, but I'm going to, it was, probably more than.
Well, it depended on who I was working for, Stephen. We'll just leave it there.
Yeah, but it was not $50 or $100 or $1,000. It was orders of magnitude more than that. So value models, and that was probably the highest value way to get a value model done. You could go to one of the consulting companies and pay anywhere from $50,000 to hundreds of thousands, maybe even a couple of $1 million in some cases for a set of value models. So when something is that expensive, one, you're not going to do very many. Two, we always knew we should be doing value models for all the competitors, but we never, basically we never did that. Three, the value models were basically stuck in spreadsheets. Yes, I know that we built these value management platforms. Ed, you and I built one of them. I built a second one at Ibica. There's at least a half dozen other ones out there. But even then, the value models became very static. And let's face it, I would guess that 95% or more of all value models ever created live in spreadsheets.
Yeah, but I mean, you're preaching to the choir here in terms of the value side of it. But I don't see many companies that are actually using value models in their AI pricing. Maybe I'm not aware of it, but are there companies that are doing that now?
I think it's starting.
Okay.
I think that the tide is beginning to turn.
Okay.
But so something that used to be expensive and static and not connected is now relatively inexpensive, is dynamic, and through things like MCP is easily connected into the other AIs that are being used in business. So those are the constraints that were removed. But the constraints that really emerged are really, I think, around trust and governance. How can I trust the value model? Can I trust the company generating the value model?
Right.
How am I going to govern the value model? Who has access to it? Who gets to change it? All of those questions now, which were, they existed, but they were sort of second order problems, are now first order problems. This is going to be a huge change in how we think about initially value models, but also pricing models.
Yeah.
One of the big fundamental changes I think we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years is that pricing models will be published to websites, and they will be published in a way that you can actually compute a price. And that is relatively rare today, except for the very simplest product-led growth companies.
Yeah, well, I saw, I mean, I think there was you guys did a blog post on the different ROI calculators that were rating. I wrote a piece about that.
Yeah, Liam did that research.
Yeah, and basically his conclusion was that most of them really kind of failed in terms of their value modeling for a variety of reasons. But I guess what your point is that the quality of those things are going to get more, are going to get higher and be more sophisticated and more accurate. Is that what you're expecting?
I'm expecting that. I'm also expecting it to become more transparent, so
Yeah.
that more and more of these things will be published in machine readable format to the web.
Yep.
As a result, there will be more selection pressure because people will be able to see them and compare them.
Hmm.
And the bad ones will get demoted and the good ones will bubble up to the top. And a virtuous circle of improvement will come into place. I also think the same thing is going to happen with pricing models.
Yeah. So maybe to shift topics a little bit, get back to something that you mentioned earlier about, AI credit policy. And I remember you and I were talking about this recently, and you said there were some tensions going on, with companies when they were implementing this policy between different stakeholders, whether they were revenue focused or whether they were customer retention focused. Could you just quickly describe what that issue is, and maybe give examples of how you've run into that and
Sure.
what you do about that?
Yeah. So so first, let's just talk quickly about some of the decisions that you need to make.
Yeah.
You are designing credit-based pricing.
Right.
So I'm going to skip over the hard, interesting stuff, which is how do you align credits with value and triangulate between value, price, and cost. So I'm going to just skip that for a moment. That's the hard part, to go to the governance rules. So governance rules are things like what happens to credits when your monthly credits expire? Can you roll them over into the next month, or do they just disappear?
Yeah.
What happens to credits when you and I are both in the same company, and we each have individual credits? Should I be able to transfer my credits to you if I'm not using them? So credit pooling. Let's say that I run out of credits and I need to top up my credits. How much should those credits cost, and should those expire at all if I've paid separately for them? So there are a whole bunch of rules, and we go into these in quite a bit of depth in the pricing for the agent economy book.
Mm-hmm.
But there's tensions among these, and I've actually experienced them myself when I've been coaching people on their credit-based pricing models. The CFO, I'm going to be caricature people here, but right, the CFO really cares that the credits are designed so that she can do revenue recognition, because nothing is worse for a company than endlessly unexpiring credits that just build up on the balance sheet as unearned revenue.
And this is on the vendor side of.
Yeah, for the vendor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't afford to have credits that never expire.
Right. But
the expiration rules have a big impact on the buyer. So if I had paid, let's just say that actually this happens to me. I'm a heavy user of Perplexity. I'm on their top subscription.
Yeah.
And I frequently run out of credits because I'm doing a lot of stuff right now. Now, I don't have the problem of having credits expire because I use the darn things faster than I can buy them.
Right.
Much to my wife's despair. But if credits that I had purchased expired, I would be a very unhappy person.
It's funny. I mean, while you were talking about that, I'm thinking about the gift card industry, which I knew someone who was in that business, and the dirty secret of it is that a lot of their profitability came out of expired credits that were never redeemed. Is there an element of that going on in the industry?
There absolutely is, and I was reading an excellent post this morning by someone who went really into detail. I'll send you the link later so you can share it.
Post it, yeah.
Because I'm having a senior moment, so I can't quite remember the guy's name or the post's name right now, or I'd mangle it if I did. But on the other hand, his entire post, nowhere did he talk about the value of the credits. So sort of rankled me a little bit. But anyway, so the CFO has one set of concerns. The revenue officer, though, or whoever's in charge of revenue, he wants those credits sold and monetized as fast as possible.
Right.
But the customer success person wants to make sure that the credits are actually being used so that the customer is happy and is getting value from their credits, and is not going to churn. So
yeah, and also not to feel like they're burning a lot of credits for low value tasks, right?
Or one of them, and I think Karan has a comment. I can't quite see it, but flashed up for a second.
He says if you can't get them to value, they will churn.
Yes, well, absolutely. Sorry, I lost my thread there, Ed. You'd asked something that I hadn't answered.
Well, we were talking about how there's some gamesmanship in terms of credit expiration, and there were different points of view about that.
Yeah, and I think that the honest policy, or the fair policy that people should implement, is first to expire, first out. So you'll remember from inventory that there's first in, first out, first in, last out.
LIFO, FIFO.
FILO.
There's also FISH.
Yeah, but I think that the one that matters in credit world is first to expire, first out.
Yeah.
But not everyone designs their credits like that. And you know what's even worse is, for a lot of these credit systems, they're very opaque.
Yeah.
If they disclose these things at all, they disclose them in the fine print, and you'd actually.
Yeah, I have my own little sort of point of view on that. As you know, I had to take more of a cynical view on these sorts of things. But my quick theory is that, companies are in a defensive mode, the AI-enabled vendors, because they have to cover their costs.
Mm-hmm.
Their margins are lower now because of the cost of running the AI models, right? So this is basically an elaborate cost plus recovery pricing model where any benefit of the doubt accrues to them if they're going to, estimate it. But that's me. So
I think but I think there are actually 2 points of view embedded in there, Ed. One is that most credit-based pricing systems are being adopted as fancy cost plus systems.
Yes.
That's one point, and that's Mark Stiving's view as well.
Yeah.
And the second is, credit governance is almost entirely done in the interests of the vendor.
Yes.
And often screws over the buyer.
Right, which gets into like, where does the value gets kind of left out of that discussion, right? Because then it becomes more of a negotiation over price ultimately.
Yeah, and in many of these cases, you don't get an opportunity to negotiate. I mean, I don't think that I'm sure I clicked on something at some point in Perplexity that said that they could screw me over.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what it was, and I probably didn't read it. And even if I read it, I would have needed Perplexity to understand.
I mean, you could say the same thing about cell phone carriers as well. But but not to go down that rat hole. Hey, we are really this has been really a fast discussion, interesting discussion. I'd like to see if any in our participants had any comments or questions. So you can just please drop that into the message app. That'd be great. I will tee it up. So I'm just thinking, Stephen, then put your future hat on, and is this what's going to be what it's like for the next few years about hashing out what's fair with credit policy, or is this going to jump to something entirely different and this ceases to become an issue anymore in terms of a fair exchange between value and price?
Yeah, so I think the big open question is whether credit-based pricing is a flash in the pan, or is
Mhm.
it a tradition to something else?
Yes, exactly.
You know, the transition to something else. There's one point of view that I've heard a number of people say over the last 6 to 8 weeks, is that credits just complicate things and just give the darn thing a dollar value and have done with it.
Right.
That's one argument I see quite a bit. A second argument says that the thing that's been driving us to credit-based pricing is the cost, and the costs are going to go down, and the pressure and this will all go away. And then the third thing I hear people say is all of this is just on the path to outcome-based pricing. So I'll sort of knock those down one at a time. So let's do cost first. So yes, the cost per token is going down and will probably continue to go down, assuming that they can build compute fast enough to keep up with demand, which is not clear that they'll be able to do that. But let's just assume that they'll do that. Even if that's true, the overall cost of inference is going to continue to go up. So, we use more and more tokens in the inference part of the AI, and it's really in inference that most of the value is generated. And I think it is.
Can you give a quick example of that to illustrate that? What do you mean by inference?
Sure. When OpenAI introduced its sort of chain of thought and its reasoning capabilities into its models, actually charged for 3 different things. It charged for input credits, or for input tokens. It charged for output tokens. But the really interesting thing was that they also charged for all of the intermediate tokens that their own systems generated in the process of doing the reasoning. And over time, I expect the ratio of input to reasoning to output tokens to become such that reasoning tokens are 70 to 90% of the total number of tokens consumed.
Wow. I was just wondering, did you see the post that Ulrich Lerkhoff-Schmidt value and outcomes? It was on LinkedIn recently.
I'll have to go look for it. I'm not
sure.
I'll
tell you just really quick, but he was saying that there's 2 ways you can do it. You could basically charge for the output, the outcome, or you could charge for the input. But he said if you charge for something in between, customers don't get it and they don't think it's fair, and it's etc. And it's kind of interesting because you're saying that that's really where the value is.
And I think he's wrong.
Okay. All right.
So the way I think about it, the different groups of possible metrics. One is roles. Roles are still a relevant thing, whether it's users or roles. That can be a pricing metric. Capacity or access guarantees can also be a pricing metric, and is one that's going to be important if there's a shortage of compute, which there could be. The next thing you can charge for is inputs. How much stuff you put into the system. Which is the easiest thing to charge for, I think, right? From a pricing management perspective. The really interesting thing is to do when you're looking at the frontier model companies is to compare what they charge for inputs versus outputs. And some of them charge different amounts for inputs versus outputs. Higher for outputs? Case by case. Not necessarily.
That's fascinating. Wish we had more time to talk about that, but that's fascinating.
But then there is the actions you take. So one thing is the reasoning, the way that all of the frontier models have to charge, because reasoning actually is a very big part of how they're consuming tokens and compute. But there's other things. Any action that you take in order to take inputs and get outputs is something that you can very easily charge for. It doesn't have to, it's not a black box. It's actually very clear. I did this, therefore I am charged that. I generated a value model, therefore I I consumed so many credits.
Mhm.
I added a competitor, therefore I consumed so many credits.
Mhm.
So I think actions are an intermediate in between inputs and outputs. And then finally, there's a difference between outputs and outcomes. So outputs are not outcomes. I think, you and I have discussed this a few
Yeah,
times.
no, that's the biggest disconnect, I think, with outcome-based pricing. A lot of outcomes are not really outcomes. They're
Yeah,
outputs.
they're outputs.
Yeah, right,
Um,
right.
yeah.
Right.
And do I think that there is going to be a massive shift to outcome-based pricing, a massive general shift to outcome-based pricing in the next 3 years? I'm very skeptical.
You
First
really
of all,
are, huh? Interesting. I didn't expect you to say that.
well, when I see the first of all, when I see the data from Tanso or Pricing SaaS or whoever,
Yeah,
that says that 10% of pricing models are outcome-based pricing right now, I don't believe it. I think
I
that
wouldn't either.
I think they're confounding outputs and outcomes.
Yes,
And if it was 2%, I would be surprised.
yes,
I'm sure it's not 10%.
yeah.
So
Well,
the amount of
so what I mean, I know we kind of went deep on this question here, but you laid out 3 scenarios for the future. So which one do you think is going to really happen?
So I think compute will remain a big. So cost will continue to be operating cost, and compute will continue to be a big factor.
Okay, so it's not so that okay, so that's not it.
I don't think outcome. I think we're on the path to outcome-based pricing, but there's a lot of hurdles before we get there. And it's going to take time. I expect I will be safely out of the picture before it becomes the general pricing model. If ever.
Yeah.
It will work in certain cases, and it will work in more and more cases over time, but there's not going to be a magic flip over to outcome-based pricing anytime soon.
Okay.
I'm working very hard to make value and pricing more transparent. So more and more value models will be published in a computable fashion so that you can actually compute them on the web, and more pricing models will be published in a computable fashion so that you can compute them on the web, and then you'll be able to run comparisons. If I've got solution A and solution B, which one is going to give me more value? How much am I going to pay for each? Under what scenarios do I get more value? So I think that's actually the realistic direction that AI is forcing us to, is value models become common, pricing models become better articulated and more transparent, and the two get put together from both the buyer side and the seller side.
Okay, well, I think we're going to need to, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I cut you off, but I think we're going to need to end that there. So, but great insights. I look forward to seeing the book. When is that going to be available, Stephen?
In October. I would like to say early October, but probably late October. There's this expert on value modeling that I asked to comment on part of it, and he wrote all sorts of comments that I need to go through. And
he was pretty brutal. My understanding was.
yeah, he was not kind. But
all right,
anyway,
we'll have to have you back. We'll have to do this again when the book comes out, because I think we barely scratched this. So thanks again, Stephen. This was awesome. A really great discussion. I appreciate your insights. I look forward to your book, and want to thank everyone again for attending this session live. It was a very, it was my first Shop Talk session, so I didn't know how this was going to go, but I was very pleased. I thought it went well. So thanks again, everyone. I think we will wrap it up and conclude this episode of Shop Talk, and we'll see you again next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you, everyone.